Welcome to In the Question podcast, where we explore the big question of life, faith, and everything in between. My name is Eric. I'm your host. Together, let's dive into this topic, which is all about budgeting. So today I'm currently joined by an accountant, certified one. I think he'll be taking us through this topic. Let me give him this time to introduce himself. So my friend Karis, welcome on board.
Thanks, Eric, for having me on this set. My name is Paul Karaoke. I'm an accountant. Jina ya mtaa yenye watu penda kutumia ni Karis, and I'm here to share some bits of financial knowledge.
So Karis, welcome on board and feel comfortable in this conversation. Let's dive in and let's talk about budget. So how would you explain budget to somebody young, especially this Gen Alpha, Gen Z, sana. Let's talk about the Gen Z because they're the ones who have been on the streets. Let's talk about them.
Okay. It's a very interesting discussion about budgeting. And maybe to kickstart everything, the understanding what a budget is.
Okay.
And a simple definition of a budget, it's an estimation of income and expenses. Generally, right now, najua unapiga hustle fulani, sivyo?
Very true.
At the end of the month, kuna do unalipwa.
Very true.
That is your income. Yes. Besides that income, uko na living expenses. Uko na housing, uko na food, uko na clothing, uko na pesa ya sherehe, unataka kupiga sherehe. Those are expenses. So how do we estimate our expenses in a way to set aside funds for saving, to set aside funds for investments, and at the end of the day, we're able to live within our means.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I get you now. I hope everyone has understood that. And as now, I would like let's do a case study for, let's say, somebody who's earning 15,000, roughly 15,000 to 20,000. How would you tell that person to budget for this money so that at the end of the month, huyu mtu anakuwa balance? You're not going negatives in your accounts and you're not going negative in your finances. So how do you explain somebody to kujipanga yani financial? Yeah.
Okay. It's important for young people, most of Gen Z, we live within our means.
Very true.
Because the biggest challenge yenye tuko nayo ni we live from payslip to the next payslip. So napata mtu ana 20,000 by date 15 do yake yote ishaisha.
Very true.
So option next ni kuingia Fuliza, Mshwari, the cycle continues. No. So when you get it right from the beginning and with that little income, it's easier to manage pia salary ya 40k, salary ya 60k. Once you have that understanding, hii ndo nalipwa nite manage aje. So let's dive in and break that 20,000. So mtu amelipwa 20,000. How do we break it in a way itakuwa guideline to this Gen Z, to this person mwenye amelipwa the 20k? Number one, tunazanga na 10%.
10%.
Hii tunarudishia Mungu shukurani.
You give Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Exactly. So 10% tunaipeleka kanisani. So mtu analipwa 20k, 10% ni 2,000.
Yeah.
So 2,000 tumeipeleka church.
Now you are at 18,000.
Tuko 18,000, sivyo? The next 10% after tumelipa God, this is where we get it wrong most of the time. We don't pay ourselves first. So napata like kwenye wanakatwa di taxes before upate the gross pay, gava ishachukua tax yake, right?
Yeah, very true.
Naturally, as a human being, what is expected of you ni you paying yourself first. Tushalipa go 10%. The next item to pay ni you yourself, the next 10%. So your 10% tunaweza yeka under savings.
Under savings.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So tumepeleka tao mbili kwa church. Tao mbili tunaweza yeka under savings. Tunaweza decide tutumia sacco as a vehicle of saving. So tuki umepeleka wapi? Kwa sacco. So salary yetu imebaki how much?
We are at 16,000.
16,000. The next 2K ni kitango investments. Yes.
Now, this is where I pose your question. I've heard there are several types of investments. Kuna long term and short term. So from these 16,000 which is remaining, do we put it on a long term investment or a short term investment?
No, investment is a very broad subject, but for the sake of this episode, tunajua utanita hapo on set 10, for the sake of this episode, tutaanza na very simple investments.
Okay, very simple.
And the very common investment ni a money market fund.
Money market funds.
So it's easier to open a money market fund. I think utanita next time to discuss it into detail, but the other 2,000 nafaa tuweke kwa money market fund.
Okay.
So already from our 20K tumetoa until 14,000. So 14,000 hii ni do yako. Hapo ndo unafaa upigie pesa ya luku, vile utadishi na pesa ya rent. The elephant in the room ni rent yenye mtu analipa. Rent ni elephant in the room. And from financial advisors, wasemanga usilipe more than 30% of your earnings as rent. So turudi kwa hesabu ya 20K. 30% ni ngapi?
30% ni 6,000.
6,000.
No. Actually, 30% is...
You're right.
6,000.
You're right. Ni 6K. So kwa ujenzi, maybe anaishi kwa 1 BR. Analipa ka 13K ama ka 12K. It's a very wrong decision.
It's a very wrong decision actually, because you'll be on a negative.
Exactly, you're living beyond your means. So this person rent yake inafaa kuwa around 6K.
6,000.
Yes. So tulikuwa 14, sivyo? Tumetoa 6K. Mbaki ngapi?
Mbaki 8,000 only.
8,000. Now even before we discuss rent, in summary, tulianza na 10% ya God, sivyo?
10% ya God.
10% savings.
10% savings.
10% investments. 10%. Right?
Yes. 50%
ni your needs.
So 50% of that is 10,000.
10,000. 50% ni 10,000.
Yes.
So kumaanisha this 10,000 inafaa kuwa rent na food.
And how do that means by the end of that month huyo mtu ana kitu yote.
So 10,000 tushajua 10,000 kuna rent na kuna food. Of which basic needs any human being ni food, shelter, and clothing. So hiyo 10K inaweza, the 50% inaweza na beyond kidogo, but these are just guidelines. So tumebakisha 20%. Na 20% ya 20K yetu ni 4K. So 4K ndio pesa ya sherehe. Ni pesa, in other words, pesa ya wants. Una feel maybe mini Gen Z, niko kwa bed sitter, nataka kununua TV. So from that 4,000 unaanza kusave mdogo mdogo ununue TV. Una feel nimelipa rent, niko na food. Maybe nataka kubai kiatu ya 2,000. You can set aside a little hundreds from ile 4K. Now within a span of 3 months umenunua kiatu.
Very
yes.
true.
So the 20% tunaweka under wants. Wants are things which you can do away with, right? Maybe mwataka kuenda out, mwataka kuenda road trip. Pesa road trip inafaa itoke from the 20%. So the chronology of things ni tulianza na God. After God tumejilipa. Tumeka 10% savings, 10% investments. Hapo ndio Gen Z tunakosea. We forget about ourselves.
So Mr. Paul, I would like to ask you a question. Sasa umenielezea mtu you have explained very well about somebody earning a salary of 20,000. Na tuka categorize your pesa, igawanyisha hadi ikafika mahali amebaki na 4,000 only for fun. Let's say this guy has an emergency. Emergency ile mnapata, for example, umeenda huko nje umekanyangia mtu nyanya, umeenda umegongea mtu kitu by accident to anything. Na huyu mtu pia akona family. Family like the mother ako uptown. Especially you find these Gen Zs, unapata wamekuja huku in the towns, especially in Nairobi, to hustle. So huyo mtu pia akona mzazi anamtegemea nyumbani. How do you approach such a situation?
Okay. Emergencies are prone to happen. So the wisest thing to do ni having a plan for it. And I think even before tuanze kuinvest, tunafaa to build into an emergency fund. Mtu anaweza lose job. COVID happened. People lost their jobs.
Very true.
I think so the importance of having an emergency fund.
Very true.
Your job inaweza katika. Something can happen. Iko una income from that particular period. What do you do na uko Nairobi?
Okay.
That's why even before we start investing, we need to build an emergency fund. So tunaweza sema the first step in this financial planning ni mtu build an emergency fund. And in the context of building an emergency fund, tunaangalia your living expenses at least 3 months. Na ikiwezekana uweke 6 months worth of living expenses.
Okay.
So kama for instance from that 20,000, ukitoa the first 30%, you are left with 70, sivyo? 70% yake ni 14K, sivyo?
Yeah.
So living expenses za huyu mtu ni 14,000. 3 months worth of living expenses ni 45. Around 45K.
Yes, it's around 45.
So hii 45K ndio tunaita emergency fund yetu. Itakuwa build over time.
Yes.
It can take even 6 years. Not 6 years, 6 months. Or even 9 months. But you're building it over time. In case something happens, tuko na do tunaweza tusaidia. So it's important tukuwe na emergency funds. When it comes to maybe uko nai mama koocha, shoshama uka koocha, and amekukall, ina come to at the end of the day we need to budget. At the end of the day we need to budget because kama uta budget hautamtumia do yenye hauna.
By the way kutuma do.
Ni ukweli.
Very true.
Hauwezi mtumia do yenye. So that call ya emergency maybe from your parents ama helping a relative, a brother and a sister, lazima tu at the end of the day tuko tumei budget. So Kenya nimeshare ni a broader angle on how you can budget 20,000, but as time goes by everything has to come in place.
Okay.
Yes.
Now we have talked about a budget of 20,000. Somebody being paid a budget a salary of about 20,000. What if the amount is less than 20,000? Let's say 10,000.
10,000.
How do you approach the situation?
It gets complicated, to be honest. So mtu alipo 10K, ukimwambia aeke do ya savings, aeke do investment, na all factors concerned za living expenses, inakuwa hard kwa portion hiyo do. So my advice to such a scenario ni that person needs to find a way to increase his or her income. Because at the end of the day kuna ile bare minimal za living expenses. Ukiangalia mtenye tuko ka single room ile cheapest unaweza pata ni 3,000.
Very true.
So regardless una earn 6k ama una earn 10k, 3,000 lazima uweke kwa rent. So if a person is earning 10k, my advice ni that person needs to find a means of adding that income. Because nitakupatia scenario. So umenipeleka on the lower end, sivyo?
Yeah.
A person is earning 100 Gs.
Yeah.
So mwenye 100 Gs na ni bachelor na ni Gen Z.
Your lifestyle ya Kilimani.
No, inasema lifestyle ya Kilimani. This guy anafaa save more than mtu mwenye 20k.
Very true.
Unaona?
Yeah.
But in most cases haifanyiki.
Very true.
So unaona?
Yeah.
So mtu mwenye ako pale 10k atafute hustle yenye itaboost hiyo salary yake ama hiyo do anapata, ndio at least apate do ya kusave.
Okay. And in terms of increasing our streams of income, because I think that's where you're heading to, do you have ideas you can recommend to somebody in that case?
Ideas. Leo mneka kwa hot seat. Mnaambia nipende business ideas hapa. I think mimi ndasema God ametubless na ametubless na minds zinaweza kuwa creative. Why have I said that? We are created differently.
Very true.
And we have different personalities.
Very true.
Me, I'm good in numbers. Ukaniambia nianze a bookkeeping firm, inaweza make sense to me.
Very true.
Right? Kuna mtu anapenda kudance. Nikumwambia story na profit and loss,
hata understand.
Mnakosana na yeye.
Very true.
Kuna mtu is a good person when it comes to talking. Mtu anapenda tu kuongea, kuchapa story vizuri. Unaona? Mtu kama huyo ukimpatia idea na marketing, it's easier for him or her implement your idea. So in short we need to do a self evaluation. Ujue strength zangu ni with this strength yangu nini naweza fanya nayo.
Okay.
Which line can I focus on ndio ikue
more productive
a source of income. Yes.
Okay.
But the good thing with the current trends, and I'm glad people are getting creative. Unaona watu wanaingia siku hizi TikTok. Mtu atafuta kitu anaenda TikTok live anauza. So that person anareach a customer mwenye angeweza kumreach. Tap screen. Tap screen
and share.
Exactly. And unaona such a side hustle.
Yes.
Mtu anaweza piga hadi jioni akitoka job. So imagine mtu mwenye analipwa 10k in a month, ametafuta product, kila jioni anaingia tap screen ya 40 minutes. Hopefully within that month amepata net profit ya 3k. Si anaweza save sasa? Exactly.
Okay. So today that has been our conversation. We'll get deeper into this conversation as Mr. Paul talks about long-term investments and other means of making money. So stay tuned. Join us in the next conversation.